7 days, 1 digital pet, 0 peace. I accidentally became a full-time parent for a week to none other than a Tamagotchi, the world's very first virtual reality pet, and the ultimate children's gimmick to drive any parent insane. It's cute, it's extremely needy, and it will bleep at you for attention every 5 minutes for at least the first few hours of its life. Tamagotchis were a huge craze back in the early 2000s, and remind many kidults my age of the nostalgia of their rapidly declining youth. Among other ghosts of Y2K's past, Tamagotchis have made a comeback recently, and since my childhood Tamagotchi didn't survive my short attention span, as an adult with unmedicated ADHD, I decided now was the perfect time for redemption. So here's the question: can I keep this tiny pixelated creature alive for a whole week, or will it break me first? After a delivery from Mr. Bezos, I unboxed my Tamagotchi and started to hatch my brand new virtual pet. I got a Generation 2 Tamagotchi, which means I could get one of any of these characters on the box. Approximately 5 minutes later, my egg hatched into a cute little Tamagotchi blob. Like all good protagonists, the star of this video needed a unique name, so I decided to call him Egg, because that's what he looked like. And just like that, I was a first-time parent with a newborn. This is not an over-exaggeration by any means. Egg was extremely needy, and wanted far more of my time and energy than I ever expected. Every few minutes, he would sound his bleepy little alarm telling me that he wanted to be fed or given attention. I even timed the amount of time between feeding Egg and him demanding his next meal, and this guy wanted a whole meal every 2.5 minutes. His greed sickens me. It was clear that the demands of this Tamagotchi were no joke. Egg is what you might call a picky eater, and is sustained entirely by a diet made up of cheeseburgers and cake. Since the Japanese Tamagotchis eat rice instead of cheeseburgers, I think it's safe to say that Egg is adopted from America. Something you might be able to tell from Egg's limited diet is that he's the kind of guy who knows what he likes and sticks to it. I can respect that, as my Pizza Hut order virtually never changes. There is comfort in familiarity after all. This means that the only way to give Egg the attention he so desperately craves every 2 to 5 minutes is to play a game of higher or lower with him. Egg will give me a number between 1 and 9, and I have to guess if the next number that appears will be higher or lower than that. Usually, this is a simple logic game based on probability, but Egg is a mischievous little guy, and he will often intentionally mislead me, giving me 2s and 8s only to follow up with 1s and 9s, and become angry at my inaccurate guesses. Sorry, Egg, I'm just following the logic. Egg is happy when you guess correctly, and looks pretty mad when you guess wrong. Egg's a fair kind of guy, and he likes to play best of 5s. His overall happiness will increase if you win most of the rounds, and if you lose, well, let's just say he gets pretty poached off. I spent the next 2.5 hours of my life feeding Egg cheeseburgers and playing with him every 2 to 5 minutes. Again, I'm not exaggerating how needy this Tamagotchi is. I went to pee once and I could hear him bleeping for me from the other room. It was very stressful. Luckily, although he might be about as needy as a newborn, Egg only pooped once in that time, actually interrupting a game of higher or lower, but still something to be grateful for. He also took a 15-minute nap at 4 p.m, and to be fair, if I'd eaten 20 cheeseburgers in the past hour, I would need a power nap too. When he woke up from his cheeseburger-induced dreams, Egg started beeping in a new way that I'd never heard before. And just like that, he evolved into a teenager. It's true what they say, you'll miss how they used to be when they're all grown up. And Egg was no longer calling for my attention every 150 seconds. Presumably, he was now embarrassed by the sight of me and didn't want to look uncool in front of his Tamagotchi friends. Funnily, he looked even more Egg-like as a teenager, with a big bump on his head that reminded me of a yoke. He was really growing into his name. I was so happy with my little Egg at this point, and feeling very much like a proud parent after the 2 or 3 hours of hard work that I'd put in. Although, luckily, no one was going to report me for child neglect for feeding my baby a diet of cheeseburgers and cake. My first day of parenting came to a close at 8 p.m, when Egg beeped for my attention to ask that his lights be turned off for the night. Fortunately for my sanity, Tamagotchis sleep through the night, and so I returned to Egg the next morning to clean up after him and feed him more cheeseburgers. Breakfast of champions. It was during this second day that Egg's new teenage personality began to shine through, and I had to discipline him for the first time. When Egg beeped at me that afternoon, I was confused. He had been fed, he was happy enough, so why had my son called for me? After consulting the wiki, I realized that this was Egg's way of acting out and misbehaving, being needy and asking for my attention when he doesn't need it. And I, as his mother, was meant to scold him. Egg did not like this one bit, but it did make his discipline meter go up, so clearly I was making the right parenting decisions. Is this the Tamagotchi equivalent of having someone agree with you on Mumsnet? I think so. Once again, Egg went to sleep at 8 p.m, and the next morning we repeated all the familiar steps. Me feeding him 4 cheeseburgers in a row for breakfast, and essentially gambling with him throughout the day. By now, I was an expert at providing all of the things a growing child needs, including cake for dessert, of course. The rest of the day involved much of the same, cheeseburgers and games. But I did take my son out for a walk in the warm English weather, where he decided to do a massive dump. Can't take him anywhere. That evening, as 8 p.m. approached, near Egg's usual bedtime, he began to make new and frantic beeping noises. I was worried he was sick or something was wrong, but it turns out that Egg was growing up once again, from rebellious teenager into moody adult. They grow up so fast. Egg must want to be a YouTuber when he grows up, because he waited until I was filming to throw himself a birthday party and evolve. He clearly likes the attention. After his celebrations, I went to feed him a congratulatory cheeseburger for his dinner, when something happened. He refused to eat it. What was wrong with my son? Was he sick? Dying? He didn't want cheeseburgers or medicine? He didn't even want to gamble. I thought he might be throwing a tantrum since I hadn't yet given him any birthday cake, so I fed him a slice, which he did eat, but something was still very wrong. He still wouldn't eat his cheeseburgers, even though he was hungry. Parental panic and desperation took over, and I tried my last resort. I scolded him. Egg was indeed throwing a temper tantrum, and luckily started eating his cheeseburgers again after I gave him a good talking to. I was so relieved. Egg's refusal to eat had shaken me to my core, and reminded me of my first Tamagotchi. What do you mean your first Tamagotchi? I thought Egg was your firstborn son. I have a confession to make. Egg is actually the second Tamagotchi that I've attempted to raise. The first one, well, I'd rather not talk about what happened to the first one. Let's just say I may have forgotten him at home one day, and, well, there were devastating consequences. What's important is that Egg was okay. I'd managed to raise him from egg to adult, and as long as I continued to be the careful and caring parent that I was, he would stay that way. Happy and thriving in his lane, with his cheeseburgers, of course. Unfortunately, my relief at Egg's well-being was short-lived, as tomorrow would mark my most challenging parenting day yet. I had to go to work and somehow keep Egg alive. I work shifts at a pretty busy cafe, and with the sun shining strong in England for the first time in a while, I knew that I was in for a crazy few shifts. After Egg went to sleep for the evening, I struggled to do the same, riddled with stress over whether or not I would be able to feed Egg and give him the attention that he needs, and worrying that one small mistake would kill the son I so lovingly raised for the past 3 days. I realized then just how attached I'd become to my pixelated child. Naming him and caring for him so often had made much more of an impact than I'd realized, and I was genuinely stressed about accidentally killing him off. This Tamagotchi was slowly taking over my life. More important than work, and even more important than eating as I rushed to put down my own plate of food to make sure that Egg got his cake and cheeseburgers. That weekend, I endlessly juggled work and taking breaks to make sure that Egg was still alive. Being a working mum is hard, but no matter how hectic it got, I made sure to keep checking on Egg, feeding him his beloved cheeseburgers, and playing games with him to keep him happy. Everyone I worked with was thoroughly entertained by my efforts to look after him during my shifts, and was very supportive of my new need to take breaks as a single working parent. After 2 full-on days, I felt very proud of myself that I'd managed to keep Egg alive, and actually quite guilty if I'd gone too long without checking on him. But at the end of 2 crazy days, just as I began to relax, Egg began beeping louder and more frantically than usual. Was he dying? Had I neglected him too much during my work? Did I not give him enough attention? Not gamble with him enough? But it was none of those things. I had mistakenly assumed that Egg was already all grown up, but he was evolving again. This time into his final form. He didn't look very much like an egg anymore, but finally, he was an adult. A cute little jellyfish-looking blob that I had successfully managed to raise all by myself. And yes, this time I did double-check that he was finally done growing. 4 days of blood, sweat, and tears all culminated in my cute little Egg finally growing up. I enjoyed my next few days with Egg. In his adult form, he didn't call for me too often, and I weirdly began to miss how often he would beep at me when he was a baby. It was surprisingly fun and rewarding taking care of him, and pushing through the challenges of juggling taking care of my pixelated son alongside my daily life. I was happy that I'd decided to give the Tamagotchi another go, but it was not to last. Egg started getting noticeably more needy around day 7. Armed with the knowledge from the Tamagotchi wiki, I realized that this could only mean one thing. Egg's health was declining. I didn't know this before, but all the cake that I'd been feeding him had apparently been really bad for his health, and it looked like the effects of this were starting to show. I played with him as much as I could, and made sure I kept him topped up on cheeseburgers, because apparently those are fine, but I could no longer stop the inevitability of what was coming. On the morning of day 9, I fed him his usual cheeseburger breakfast, and a couple of hours hours later, I heard a beep that I hadn't heard before. I rushed to Egg to try and help, give him a cheeseburger, some medicine, anything that I could do to save him. But none of the buttons worked anymore. Egg was unresponsive.
He's dying.
The rapid beeping slowed, and eventually, my poor little Egg died.
Oh no.
Naturally, I held a short ceremony in his honor, and I couldn't help but reflect on the past week of raising my little Tamagotchi. The highs, the lows, the stress, the guilt. Despite its challenges, I had loved looking after my own little digital pet. And now that it was over, I was left with only one thing left to do: start the cycle again. Let me know if the story of Egg touched you, and if you had your own Tamagotchi when you were a child. Maybe you've considered picking it up again as an adult. I'd highly recommend it.